We did a lot of talking during the reports that were particularly boring, but Bo sends his greetings, misses y'all. He's going to come out to the homeless outreach with us here in the near future, so you'll probably be able to see him there. But we were talking together. Bo and I were sitting, and we were talking about all kinds of things, and one of the things we were talking about is the kind of community and the kinds of communities that we have been blessed to be a part of. Because if you come to this church in any capacity, whether you are a part of our physical campus or our virtual campus, and there are people participating virtually today. I've been contacted by people not only here in the metro, but also in Tulsa and in Kansas City and down in Dallas that are interested in what we're talking about today. And so wherever you are, I want to welcome you. But Bo and I were talking about how this is one of those places where when you come here, I'm gonna talk to you about God's redemptive work, right? I do that every Sunday. In some capacity or another, I tell you that the love of Christ is proactive, sacrificial, and unconditional. It has to be shared non-judgmentally and non-coercively, right? So we talk a lot about participating in what God is doing. Bo and I were talking, we're like, it's so great to be a part of communities of faith where we're not just going to talk about that, we are then going to provide opportunities for you to live into what God is calling you to do to help redeem brokenness in the world. Last week, preached a sermon about cutting trail, about how sometimes when God gives you a call, it is your responsibility to go cut the trail that's necessary to figure out how to do what you've been called to do, because the calling is yours, and if the calling is yours, so is the responsibility to cut the trail that will help other people to figure out how to live into that calling and then invite them to come with you. We did that with the Homeless Outreach Mobile Ministry. We had a mobile meals ministry here at Southern Hills that had been thriving for decades. One afternoon when I was tired of working on budgets, God said, why don't we go do something? I said, okay, God, what do you want to do? God's like, we should go do homeless outreach. I'm like, that's a bad idea. I don't know anything about it. God's like, I do. I'm like, well, you're God. I'm not. And that led to walking into homeless camps, taking food around, driving around the I-240 corridor. That evolved into feeding people. I was talking with some of our friends who aren't able to be here today. They're going to be watching online. We were talking about how when we first started the Homeless Outreach Mobile Ministry, we were freaking out about how we were ever going to feed 20 people, and then 30 people, and then 40 people. And then all of a sudden, we ended up with all of these clothes and shoes and toiletries and dog food and cat food. And then there was a whole other organization bringing dog food. And then there was a whole other organization that was bringing clothing and other things. And now there's a whole other organization providing medical care. And I didn't get the numbers from Tuesday, but the week before that, there was like 138, I think, that we served. I think the most we've ever done is about 165, 167, something like that. And so we're in the process at the next members meeting. You're going to be talking with us about a plan that we have to create a separate 501c3 nonprofit organization under the umbrella of Southern Hills that will allow us to have greater access to funding. There's one grant that Debbie Schultz has found that could provide us somewhere between $500 and $5,000 every single month, depending, but they won't provide that to a religious organization. So giving us access to funding is going to help us expand that ministry. We're also now building partnerships with people like Felicia at Exchange Avenue Baptist Church, who have helped us do everything from make connections with groups of Christians who might be able to help us feed more people on more days in the same location, to helping us find furniture for some of our friends who've been experiencing homelessness, who have just made it into the first apartments they've been in a long time. God's doing cool things. So I'm preaching about this because I do that from time to time. And I get up and I say something about human trafficking on the I-40 corridor, and how, because it's a terrible problem here. The I-40 corridor is if not the major thoroughfare for human trafficking in the United States of America. It is a huge problem, right? And so I'm preaching about this because it goes right through Oklahoma City, right? I-40 connects with I-240, which you can see from here, right? And I'm like, so when, I shouldn't have said this, I'm like, when, I'm all passionate, you know, because sometimes I get passionate. I'm going to talk about the 19 children and 2 adults that lost their lives last week when we start the Foundry service. But I'm going to save that for then. I get passionate about things, so I'm getting passionate about it. I'm like, why aren't the people of God doing something about this right here in Oklahoma City? One of you, and you're here, comes right up to me after the service like the Holy Spirit was talking to me, and the Holy Spirit's like, why aren't you doing something about this right here in the I-40 corridor? Let's do something, right? So we're going to. Why? Because God asked, and where God leads, we follow. Because somewhere today, there is a girl, not a woman, a girl, sitting in a hotel room somewhere. Through a series of circumstances, she was either taken or taken from her family. And she's sitting there after having endured a night that for her would have been like so many other nights she's endured, where she had to do things that we don't even want to talk about in church. And she's sitting there, waiting for the next thing to happen, asking God for somebody to come and help her. Let's be that somebody. I promised you that we would follow the procedure that worked so well for us when we were getting the homeless outreach off the ground. And for us, that procedure was to seek people who know what we don't know. My guess is you probably don't have a lot of experience in human trafficking, which means that as passionate as we are, if you talk to anybody who participates in the homeless outreach, we're all going to tell you there was so much in the beginning we didn't know. We said things we shouldn't have said. We did things that we should have done differently than the way that we did them, because even with the best of intentions, you can cause harm. We don't want to cause harm. We're going to learn what we don't know. And in the process of learning what we don't know, of meeting people who are a part of a community that we want to step into and make a meaningful difference in and together with, in the midst of all of those things, even while we're learning, the Holy Spirit is going to open the doors that we should be walking through. The Holy Spirit's going to show us what our niche is, the way in which we are going to make a difference, right? You're going to hear me talk later about this. We're not a congregation full of Delta Force veterans who can go storm hotels, but we have a niche. We have a way that we can help. We can do a lot more than nothing, and that's why you're here today. So, in that vein, here's what you should expect in the future. I'm going to continue to have meetings. I'm going to have meetings that are centered on dialogue, and I'm going to have meetings that are centered on learning. So this meeting is going to give us an opportunity to learn a little bit. Our next meeting is where we're going to come together and we're going to brainstorm. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do between now and the next meeting, which right now, tentatively, I want to put right at the beginning, probably right after the 4th of July. I want you to write down all the questions you have. I want you to write down all the links that you found about organizations that are doing cool things. The Dragonfly Initiative is one right here in the metro. There's another organization, the name escapes me, somebody brought it to me, from Arizona, that does something very similar to what you're about to hear about today. Write them down. Write them down, send them to me, bring them to the next meeting. We're going to have microphones set up in that meeting where we're going to get up and we're going to share our ideas, we're going to share the things we've learned, and we're going to figure out, based on what we're learning, what we need to do next to learn more. And at some point, in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, the Holy Spirit is going to open a door. And we're going to see the door, because we've been learning, because we've been following, and we're going to know, because the Spirit is guiding us, that that's the door we walk through. Let's start that today. I want to introduce Heather. This is Heather Oden. Heather is my sister, and she and her family are here. You're going to hear me tell them we're going to have all the fun this weekend. Right now, well, not right now at my house. They're not at my house because they're here. But we have 11 people and 9 dogs and a cat at my house. And then I was counting with Michelle, because I was trying to figure out how many more people are coming later today for our Memorial Day Remembrance Celebration thing. We've got like 8 more people coming today. We are going to have all the fun. So Heather and her whole tribe is down here from central Kansas. Heather runs an organization called Light Up the Dark, and they do a lot of things. She's going to share some of that with you, but one of the things that they do there, although it's geared toward a population that's different than what we're trying to step into ourselves, is a solid idea for something we should be looking at. Real similar in many respects to what the organization from Arizona that I'm going to bring before you in our next meeting does. And I want to start learning about how the people who do these kinds of things do them. I want to learn about how they organize them. I want to learn about how they fund them. I want to learn about how they maintain them. I want to learn about how they staff them. I want to learn about what they do while they're there, right? So we're going to hear some of that from Heather today as she makes her way up here. We've got a short video about that ministry that is going to give you a little background and a little bit of context. So without further ado, this is Light Up the Dark.
So I didn't know much about Light Up the Dark before I got into the Lighthouse.
I was in Kansas City. I had lost my job. I was in and out of a homeless shelter. I didn't know where to go. I had no direction.
My marriage was failing. I was in active addiction. I have 3 kids. I had tried killing myself, running away, just trying to leave everything.
Nothing was going right. Nothing in my life was going right. I was in a place that I didn't really know. I was in a city I didn't really know. I had no car, no job. I hadn't seen my kids in a long time. My parents wouldn't talk to me. I didn't know what to do or where to go or who to call upon to give me some kind of direction.
Things were going bad, and they were only going to get worse.
I felt for the first time death. I mean, I felt like this is it. This is where it's going to end soon.
I got to the point where I knew that if I didn't change or do something different, that something bad was going to happen.
In May, got to a fight, failed the drug test, was back here, had nothing, stayed in lines for 2 weeks, spent my last $20 on meth. And then the next day my sister came and picked me up and said, nope, no more. And I went and met you guys.
I called, talked to Heather, and that's when my mom brought me down here to meet you at the college. It looked horrible. I looked beaten and broken. That was before.
Okay.
Light Up the Dark is an unapologetically Christ-centered group of people who come alongside anybody who wants to start again.
Moving in, me and my 3 girls, the toilet backed up and everything, like, all I could think was like, oh man, I'm just like ruining this from the start. And so I was just sure that next day that they'd be like, this is too much, I can't, right? And I was just waiting for like the shoe to drop and for them to be like, okay, I don't think you're fit for this. And it was never like that.
Being a drug addict for so many years, I just thought that, well, cool, they're going to give me a free place to stay. And little did I know that there would be such a connection and how the walls just tumbled down after, we got to know each other and we broke down these barriers and these triggers. And then through that trust, we came closer to God. And
you guys were always there, just cheering me on. If I would have ever relapsed, you wouldn't have automatically dropped me. You would have been like, okay, how can we fix this? What do we need to try to do different? How can I help you not go and do the same thing?
Whether it's in Lighthouse or in our prison ministry or in our classes, what we're doing is connecting people to real resources and real tools and real power to change their lives.
Every piece that's missing in a broken person's life, you guys have thought about it. And not only are we teaching them, we're also holding ourselves accountable.
When I was called to Light Up the Dark, I just told him, like it was maybe last night or the night before, it was actually God calling me. Whatever his garbage is, I have the same garbage. So in the end, I get drawn closer to God just as he does.
My Lighthouse experience was scary at first. Then once she and I got our relationship figured out, it was like night and day. Like we trusted each other. I knew she was telling me the truth.
It was just an absolutely amazing experience that could have been from no other person but God.
100%.
You spend 18 months with them and provide them with support and all these resources that are available to them. And if they put the work in, we're going to walk alongside them. And I'm just happy to be a part of that.
When I first came into Lighthouse, I had warrants for my arrest. I was in debt up to my ears. I just bought a house of all things in life that I thought I would never do again. I have my kids back, and we have become so close.
I have made friendships that will last forever. I have become a parent that my kids look up to. I'm trustworthy.
And so to watch that process and what came out of it and how she is today, and I got to be part of that. And that's a blessing, and she's a blessing.
I love you.
I love you too.
And that's what Light Up the Dark is so important, because the things that we have in our minds that are so tangled up that we think that we can never untangle, that life is just going to be like this forever, it doesn't have to be. It takes time, it takes the correct setting, it takes the correct people, and it takes a whole lot of God. And once you have all three of those in your life, nothing is impossible.
If you follow Lighthouse, the rest is living.
If you've tried life and you've tried it in so many different ways and you can't seem to get going like I did for the last 20 years, and if you're screaming at God and wondering what is going on, why your life has never started, come talk to us and let's try to figure out a plan. If I could tell you my full story, anything is possible. God is here, He is real, and if you want a place where you can explore that, Light Up the Dark's the place.
If you want to connect with us, check out any of our social media accounts pasted below, or visit our website at www.lightupthedark.live.
For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," is the one who has shone in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory and majesty of God, clearly revealed in the beautiful face of Christ. My name is Heather, and I want to tell you a story. I grew up with Matt. Apologies later. When I turned 41, the summer I turned 41, I experienced a lot of internal upheaval and distress. That tension that started kind of toward the beginning of the summer, I came to God. It was in my living room. I came to God and I said, I don't understand what is happening to me. Everywhere I turn in my life, I keep running into the same walls over and over and over, and I can't even put my finger on what those walls would be. God, I'm gonna ask you something that you know I've always been afraid to ask you. Make me all yours. I don't care what that looks like. Just make me all yours. Because in my mind, I was thinking that if I prayed that prayer, I had been afraid to pray it before because I thought, oh, he's going to make something terrible happen to me, And so we're always afraid to pray that because people talk about how you grow through trauma and pain. And so I was always afraid to pray that prayer. Here's the thing. I had already been through trauma and pain, and I had repressed it. So it wasn't until I prayed that prayer that God started opening those doors for me of healing. All those memories were locked away. But here's the funny thing about memories that are locked away. They don't not affect your current living. They bubble up in places you don't expect, like a beach ball that you're trying to hold underwater that shoots out in a direction you don't expect, at a time you don't expect, and you don't even understand why you're feeling the ways that you're feeling or why you're behaving the ways that you're behaving. So I prayed that prayer. And it was over that summer that I began to feel more and more and more tension. I was frustrated because I thought if I prayed that prayer, things would start getting better. Well, it culminated on Labor Day weekend of, was it 2014, I believe? And memories at that point, over the next 2 weeks, pieces of memories surfaced of a gang rape that had happened to me when I was 17. I had always remembered up to a certain point in that evening, and I had always remembered the next morning, but there was a space of time that I didn't remember. And those memories came gently, and they came in pieces, and they came just enough for me to know what it was that God was going to start walking me through the healing process for. As I began healing from that, it became clear to me that it was time for me to change the chapter of my vocational life. I had been a teacher. I had then stayed home to take care of our kids. And then I worked full-time on our farm. I like people. I don't love numbers. So I was doing a lot of like data entry and grain tracking and, you know, not what I'm wired for, okay? So what I got the message for was, I want you to start an organization where you speak life into people. I did not even know what that looked like. So when I hear Matt talking about we didn't have a framework for what we were doing, we didn't even know what we didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know either, but that's the gorgeous thing about these adventures that God takes us on. He's already there. He's already doing the thing. He's with the girl in the hotel room. And he's putting those answers in place for each soul that he's coming to rescue, right? And he was rescuing me at that time. Okay, so I start this organization, and I'm not sure, the only thing I can think of to go speak life into people is to be a motivational speaker, and I'm not a big like, boom, rah, rah, you know, like that didn't appeal to me, you know. And so as I'm doing forming the 501c3, getting a board ready, getting all the pieces of the puzzle in the right spaces, wait, I'm going to push pause on my story. I have a story to tell you. It's about a young man named Jacob. I gave birth to Jacob. Jacob he was an old soul. He was a gentle soul. And when he was going through junior high, he struggled some with anxiety and depression and self-harm. And we kind of went on a healing adventure of our own. And as he was entering high school, I had a conversation with him about what he was going to do when he graduated from college. And he's like, you know, I'm not really sure. He knew he had a heart for people. I said, wouldn't it be great if Light Up the Dark was big enough that after college, you could come back and work for Light Up the Dark? And I remember him sitting on my living room couch, and he pointed his finger at me, and he said, that's what I would do. That's what I would do. He was entrepreneurial, so he had started started a business with a friend of his where they would pull rye. We live in a rural community. Pull rye out of, or not rye, pigweeds. Sorry, my family's over here going rye. You know, it's different when you're up talking in front of people. Pigweeds. He would pull pigweeds out of fields, and had hired several, like, I don't know, 15 or 20 probably high school kids that they managed. And he and JJ were coming home for lunch one day, August 3rd. Caitlin and I, which is, JJ is my oldest daughter, Caitlin is my, oh no, he's not, he's my oldest son. He's a boy. Caitlin is my youngest daughter. She and I were actually headed down here to Oklahoma City so that she could stay here with some cousins. They were headed home for lunch, JJ and Jacob. And I got a call. When I answered, it was from JJ. All I could hear was wind. And I said, did you mean to call me? And I didn't hear anything. I said, JJ, are you there, buddy? Just wind. So I hung up. They had entered in a rural intersection, and a man who was high on methamphetamine T-boned them, and the pickup spun and rolled. Jacob was thrown, and JJ walked Jacob home that day in a ditch on the side of the road. But God was there too, and he was already putting pieces in place to heal JJ and Lexi, Cody and Caitlin and John and other people who knew Jake. And because Jacob had said, oh, I would come back and I would work for Light Up the Dark full time, that's what would give my life meaning, we made his memorial Light Up the Dark. And that memorial money is what started Lighthouse. Lighthouse has become the doorway for other people's healing. I didn't know when I started Light Up the Dark what we should make our web page name, which sounds odd that this is even something that I would talk to you about, but here's the thing. Everybody kept telling me you should make it heatheroden.com, because if you want them to find you, if you want them to hire you to come speak, if you want to be visible, you need to use your name. But all I kept hearing from God was light up the dark, light up the dark, light up the dark, light up the dark. And when I asked him, here's what he said. You've been telling your story. You've been telling the story about how you were gang raped and how we have healed. And moving forward, there were a lot of people, a lot of women especially, but men as well, who would come and find me later and tell me their stories. There are a lot of people who could relate to that piece of my story, but you know what? There are a lot of other stories to tell. And when we get together and we put our stories together and when we heal together, we reach a whole lot more people than just one specific demographic. So in terms of demographics, as Matt referred to before, Light Up the Dark and Lighthouse is not specifically geared toward human trafficking, although we have housed and helped trauma recovery from survivors of trafficking. Our demographic is breathe in, breathe out, humans who have been through trauma and who want to start again, who want to push, pause, redirect, get some direction. That's the demographic that Light Up the Dark serves. So I mentioned in the video that we have a prison ministry and we have classes, and those are things that we do, but I'm here today specifically to talk about Lighthouse, because I could tell you the story of Amber, who was brought to me at my other job, because in the meantime, while I'm forming Light Up the Dark, I'm becoming certified as a sexual assault advocate so that I can advocate for men and women who have been survivors of violent sexual situations. I am becoming a certified life coach so that I can speak life with and to people who have incurred trauma and pain, and that we can find the light breaking through the darkness and find life together. So I was hired by Sterling College to be their life coach and sexual assault advocate. So Amber was actually brought to my office at Sterling College with a black eye and a bruised face. And one thing that I'm sure that you will find, I'm sure you found it in your homeless ministry, and you'll find it as you begin to rescue and walk with survivors of trafficking, is that there's a lot of comorbidity in our trauma. So domestic violence doesn't usually exist on its own. Drug addiction doesn't usually exist on its own. Rape doesn't usually exist on its own. So Amber came married to a gentleman who was also really broken and lost, the mother of 3 girls, a cosmetologist who loves Jesus and is a woman of amazing, amazing strength. That's one of the things that I am just dumbfounded by in Lighthouse, is that I'm the lucky one that gets to walk alongside these men and women who have amazing stories. And they're stories of just being able to get up every morning and to do the next right thing and to be vulnerable enough to share some of the most broken pieces and parts of their lives. I get to sit first row on the sideline and watch how God heals each of these men and women. I could tell you the story of Sean, but he told you the story of how when he came, he was high on methamphetamine during his interview for Lighthouse. And now he's a homeowner who's got his kids, who has been promoted at his job, I believe 4 times now. So he oversees other people and has responsibilities in that way. And he is an advocate and on leadership for Light Up the Dark. And he wants to share, he and Kevin are about to, this summer they'll be starting a podcast because they want to get out to people, they want to speak life out into people. I could tell you, so you saw Mike Hill. in the video. Mike Hill is a program director at the jail. We have men and women who have come into Lighthouse who were convicted felons. Here's the thing. We all make sense when we understand ourselves. So it's easy culturally to sit where I'm sitting and look at someone else who's had a totally different life experience and to judge if they're a good or bad person based on some labels that they have, right? Like felon. But it's different when I find out that somebody is selling drugs because that's the only way they can put food in their kids' mouths, or they're selling sex because that's the only way they have a couch to sleep on at night. Because a lot of times trafficking isn't always the organized trafficking that we talk about, like with the I-40 corridor. A lot of times trafficking is within people who just are acquaintances of each other, and someone is trying to find a place to sleep at night, so they end up sleeping on different couches and selling their bodies so that they have a roof over their head. That's not an easy story to open up and tell. And here's a question. How did their life get so bad that it got to the point where they were couch surfing and selling their bodies? I mean, that's only part of the story. So, the approach that we have in Lighthouse is twofold. It's relational and empowering. So, relational. We are created in the image of a triune God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, right? God is interdependent on himself. He's not dependent on himself, and he's not independent. He's interdependent. He works within his being, correct? So we are created in that image. We are not to be, as our culture and society idealizes, we're not to be independent. What good is being independent? What good is being all on my own island, all doing all my own thing, all about me, me, me? Who's on the throne then? It's not Jesus. We're not supposed to be independent. We're also not created to be dependent. Because when I'm dependent, then I'm a slave to whatever it is that has mastered me. We are created to be interdependent, which means that I have things to give, and there are things you have to give that I have to receive. That creates a level playing field. If you remember Kevin and Sean, who were up on the screen telling their story, Kevin will tell you, and he alluded to it in the video, that when he was called to light up the dark, he thought he was called to help Sean, like he had all the answers. He was going to, bend down and pull Sean up out of the... That's not at all what happened. There are beautiful, brave, courageous things, redemptive pieces of life inside of Sean that changed Kevin. And it was beautiful to be there and watch as God worked those relationships so that there was healing that took place that the advocates didn't even realize they were in for. So let me, as I talk about the advocates, let me talk a little bit about structure. So we are relational, which means that the growth that takes place in the incubator of safe and healthy relationships. Okay, so a lot of times when people come in a time of trauma or after much trauma, there are not always healthy relationships to lean on, or not enough of them. So what we do in Lighthouse is create those healthy relationships. The way that we relate to each other is that Lighthouse, even though there is an actual brick and mortar house, Lighthouse, the program, takes place in meetings. So there are 5 to 6 meetings depending on your life story that you are required to go to each week. Okay, so one of them is your goals meeting. So that goals meeting has myself, life coach, and I also am the journey director for everyone. Myself, the resident, and their advocate. So when they come into Lighthouse, they have me. They get paired with an advocate of the same gender, and I'm telling you right now, I just pray. I just pray to match them up. And here's the amazing thing. Every single time that I have prayed to match somebody up, there are pieces of their backstory that I'm not even aware of that come out and end up creating healing and light in the dark for them. It blows my mind. So anyway, advocate, myself, and the resident are involved in the goals meetings. Then there is something called a one-on-one, which is where the advocate and the resident meet together. That meeting is centered around spiritual growth and development. So wherever they are in that, God always comes and meets us where we are. Okay, so this is not a canned, everybody goes through this book, and then you have to say this magic prayer, and then you come over here and you sacrifice this goat. That's not what we do. So we figure out, where am I? What do you believe? Are you angry at God that you were sitting in the hotel room and you prayed a prayer and nobody showed up except the guy who paid for you? Let's talk about that, okay? We meet you where you are. No judgment, no coercion. Let's see, church. Church is one of them. We don't care what church they go to, wherever they find fellowship and community. But it's scary to get out and be around people. So just getting up, getting out, and being around people and filling my heart, filling my ears, filling my mind with good, that's required weekly. We have an addiction recovery group. So if there is chemical addiction history or behavioral addiction history in their story, they're required to go to either our addiction recovery group or another one. We have a house meeting now. That's where everybody in the house comes together once a week. We spend about 5 minutes going through what are the chores, what's the budget look like, and the remaining 55 minutes telling stories about here's what's on the dashboard of my life this week. Here's how I see God working. Here are the things that I'm struggling with. I would not miss that meeting. Like, I'm having surgery on Wednesday, but I will Skype in for the meeting that night. Okay? What am I at? I'm missing one. Oh, counseling. That's huge. Okay, so counseling is required, has to be a state licensed counselor. We prefer that they also have a solid faith base because that just kind of weaves everything all together. So in counseling, they're going to do a deep dive into some of those things that need to have a deep dive done into, like anything that would be, I don't do diagnosis. So anything that would be a diagnosis-related issue, anything that would be uncovering of repressed memories, that's not something I do as a coach. So they will do those deep dives into things and are typically taking what has happened and processing those things piece by piece. In the coaching side, during a goals meeting, what we'll do is we'll spend the first part of the meeting checking off, did we go to the meetings that we were supposed to go to this week? And if not, what was more important than doing that? What was more important than being an active part of my own recovery and healing? And what was holding me back? The second thing we do is set goals for the upcoming week. The third thing we do, which is 3/4 of the meeting, is coaching. And that is where we take a look at whatever is on my dashboard. It could be something from the past. It could be that I started a new job and all these people at work are talking about me and I just want to quit, and talking about how do I, from where I am to where I want to be, how do I work the steps to get there? And it can be in any realm. So relational approach is what we do in Lighthouse, and we have all of these meetings to help encompass a holistic perspective on taking me from where I am to where I want to be. Okay, that's one part of our approach. The second part of our approach is empowerment. So, we must be very careful because there can be a line when people have incurred trauma. There is a line between being empowering and enabling. And sometimes that line is really hard to discern because on a given day, I may be in a space where I cannot be around people. Like maybe I've had a really tough counseling session and it's not good for me to just go clock in at my night job, you know? So taking a look at what is empowering and what is enabling and giving people tools to use on their own, like I was saying in the video, life-giving tools that can be used in any part, any segment of their life. That's part of what the approach of Lighthouse is as well. At this point, I think I'm going to open it up to you if you want to come up and ask me specifics about anything that I might not have covered in terms of structure, or I guess one thing I will say is when we initially started Lighthouse, we did have multiple lighthouses, and they were single-family dwellings. Okay, so we found that we're now in our 6th year of Lighthouse. We found some pluses to that, but honestly, at our 5-year mark, when we kind of phased everyone out, did some regrouping, we opened a women's house. And I would say that when we are working toward trauma healing and trauma recovery, having community within the house itself is really helpful, especially in the first phases of healing. And then moving out into separate homes makes sense. But that would be one way structurally that we've changed from what we started from.
Okay, so good segue. And also, I enjoyed hearing that tremendously. Would you just take a moment? Let's tell Heather thank you for being here with us. And obviously, I have been there, right? So I've seen some of that. For those of us who are kind of working to wrap our minds around what that could look like, share with us just a little bit about the actual structure of the place. So is it they're houses, right? They're individual. You've had individual houses. Now there's
now there's one house.
One house.
And so what we do with this one house, we have a women's house. In the women's house, there are 2 bedrooms that are upstairs that are private bedrooms, and then a bathroom upstairs. And then downstairs, there's a dorm room with 2 more beds and a bathroom, but those 2 beds are in the same room. Right. There's a little divider. So you pay a little bit more, and you have if you have seniority, you have the right to say if you want to be in one of those private bedrooms. And then we have a living room. We have a family room that has a set of French doors, and in the family room is often where we conduct our meetings. Okay, and when we have, it's kind of an open concept main floor, so the living room and then the dining room is set up with a really long picnic table and a whiteboard at the end, so if we do classes or if we have some sort of mini seminar, we can also do it right there at the house, and then we have a nice big kitchen with an island, and everybody has separate cabinets of their own, and then there's also shared groceries, and so that's how it's structured at this point. Nice big backyard.
So that leads to a couple of questions. One of them, is there a set time that people stay there, or is there an average length, of time that people stay?
That's a great question. The program itself is set up to be up to 18 months. We have had some younger women who've been in the program in the past apply for extensions. And in fact, Sean officially transitioned out at around 14, 15 months, but his one-on-one meeting with Kevin turned into they wanted to actually dig into the Bible, but they were both really kind of unsure about how to do that. So I was like, how about if I come the first couple times that you do the actual Bible? Okay, so then they were like, can you just keep coming back? And then they just start inviting more people, and we still have a Bible study going now based off of that one-on-one. So awesome. There's a joke that because Lighthouse is relational, you can come into Lighthouse, but you can never leave.
Okay, that sounds good. The jobs, do people have jobs? Do they work jobs while they're staying there and going through the program?
Yes.
Does it vary? How does that?
Right. So there are some other qualifications that keep you that are indicators of if you are actively involved in your own healing and recovery, right? So one of those is having a full-time job, or if it's not full-time, a job that is making you enough money that you can support yourself, because we are being enabling if we are not, assisting with the standing on my own 2 feet, Okay, so having the job, and then what was the other thing I was gonna, if there has been a chemical addiction in the past, we do random UAs but typically when you're living with people, you can also tell. Right. And so we have in the past had situations where we suspect relapse, and usually what we have to do is just say, okay, if I were to give you this test, how would it come out? And they're like, okay, we need to talk. Yeah. And we'll say, okay, let's talk, let's see what's going on.
Okay. All right, so you mentioned that initially the funding came from Jake's Memorial. Mm-hmm. How do you get your funding now? Where do you get funding?
It's all private. It's all private donations. So when you were talking before about forming a 501c3, our 501c3 is faith-based. And so because we're faith-based, we are not eligible for a lot of government grants. We did that on purpose. It's not that we're against reaching tons and tons of people, but just for our specific mission, we just have the resources that we have, and we know that without the light of Christ, there isn't going to be full healing. And so at this point, God is providing that stable income through some organizations that donate to us, but mostly private individuals and families who just see what is happening and want to be a part of that, and that's how they can be a part of that. One of the things that we talk about is that everybody should be able to have a full-time job and a family and light up the dark.
Okay. That's helpful, and I have lots of ideas and lots of questions, but I also need to kind of wrap us up. Mm-hmm. Is it okay? Can we take like 2 questions?
Oh, yeah,
all right.
absolutely.
So we don't have mics for you. I'm going to take just 2 questions, and they're not planted. So if you really want to ask a question, get ready. But I'm also going to repeat the question that you asked so that everybody here can hear it and everybody who is participating virtually. So who has a question? What questions do you have? Yes. Okay, so the question is, in the women's house, mm-hmm. how many people are actually there? And along those lines, if you could add a little bit about privacy. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things we've been thinking about moving this direction is we probably definitely don't want everybody to know where this house is mm-hmm. or how to gain access to her. Mm-hmm. So love to know more about how you've
That's something that we've had to really navigate, the privacy issue, especially in a smaller community. So in the current house that we have, it's 4 women, like permanently. We also, and the reason I say permanently is because we also want to be a safe house facility for people if they need a safe house to be temporarily. So we also have 3 beds that are there if they are needed. In the past, we've housed more people than that, like when we had multiple houses. We also, though, as you're developing this, what is most important is that you have the people and the structures in place to support the people that are coming in. Sure. And it takes roughly 5 other adults for each person that is coming in. So we're looking at 20 volunteers approximately for those 4 women. So that's just something to kind of bear in mind. Also, you're in a much larger urban area, and we're in a rural area, so that would make a difference as well. In terms of anonymity and safety, because we are in a small community, it's really difficult for us to keep that location from being known, because everybody kind of does want to be involved, and so if they want to pray for it, if they want to come work on the house, there's no way in a small community that's not going to be known. So the way that we get around that, or the way that we create safety there, is that we do have camera surveillance. The police officers know and drive by frequently. We do have safety in that we have parking on the back side of the house, which we, in our first lighthouse, did not have, and so we have some spaces to kind of help with.
Stay out of sight, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there another question? Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about what they
So part of the question then, for those of you who are virtual, is how do you determine what the residents pay into the program or give into the program?
Right. So we keep our lighthouse numbers completely open to them. Every week they get a financial report when we have the house meeting, and the way that those numbers are determined is we take in our mortgage payment on the house, the house insurance that we have to pay, the utility bills. That's roughly just kind of the cost of owning the house, and we divide that up by 4. And so they can see, how much needs to come in each month, and that's where then some of our outside donations come in to offset that. Because like currently, we had a relapse situation that this person was just, that's the direction that they still needed to go. Yeah. Okay, so they moved out by choice. We had someone who finished Lighthouse, so we had a legacy celebration, and we have 2 people who are still on their journey in Lighthouse. We have a girl who's about ready to move in this next coming Friday. So right now we're going to be at 75%, but we structured the house so that it could still run at 75%. So we don't have to be pulling people in to make things work.
Right. Question? Yes. So I think the question is, do they have to have a job before they can come into the program?
They absolutely do not. We know that they're going to be coming in probably off the streets or from some sort of a high-risk, high-trauma situation. So we have funds available to help float them through really that first 3 weeks to a month. Typically by week 3, so usually during the first week they find a job. So if they're not getting paid every Friday, it's usually then 2 weeks in. But when they come in, they'll have a grocery gift card that's 2 Dillons. We don't give cash. We don't give cash to residents, but we do give gift cards. We have a downtown location called the Light Post that if they're really struggling to find a job, they can work at the Light Post for living credits, and then those living credits go on gift cards to be able to get their necessities until they have a job.
All right, I'm gonna wrap us up, kind of draw things to a close. So let me ask you this: what's been the most unexpected thing that you've encountered?
Finding the rest of my people in people that I never knew. So we were talking last night when we were at your house, and people were swimming, and I referenced Uncle Sean, which my kids know as Sean, right, who I didn't even know 7 years ago. And you're like, who's Uncle Sean? I'm like, you've met Sean? He's like, I don't think I know who you're talking about. Okay, so Cody said, our family is a tribe, so get used to our family, And so I think the most unexpected thing has been finding the rest of my people in people that I didn't even know.
That sounds so much like some of the experiences of the volunteers we have in the homeless outreach. They'll tell stories similar to that. I would love to continue, but we need to draw things to a close.
Thanks for having me.
I am so grateful that you and your family are able to be here. If you come to the next service, you're going to see most of us jumping off the roof into the pool, but we'll save that for later. Thank you.
Thanks
really
for having me.
You guys join me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so in our next meeting, I'm going to bring to you some information about this organization in Arizona that I've mentioned. I'm going to bring some literature and also a couple of videos I want you to watch. But the main focus of that meeting is going to be dialogue amongst us, okay? We'll make that meeting available on our virtual campus as well, and we'll have options for interaction there too. So between now and then, I would love for you to do a couple of things. One is seek out information. Go seek out information. If what you have heard today has sparked an interest in something, maybe an idea, something that you heard that you'd like to know more about, go and find out what you can find out. Write down what you learn. Get materials about what you've learned. Bring it to me. Bring it to us. We want to filter those ideas into our process of discovery. The other thing that I want to invite you to do is spend a great deal of time. I would love for you to make a commitment to a time of prayer and discernment between today and when our next meeting is. Now, I hope that you have a place where you pray. I say that every now and then. If you don't have a place where you pray, go home, find a place, and pray there. Because you're going to find that if you have a place where you pray, you're going to start praying in places other than the place where you pray, and then before you know it, you're praying all over the place all the time. Have a place where you pray, right? But for the next month or so, I would love for you to make a commitment to be in prayer about the inception of this ministry, God's guidance for us as we move into making this ministry a reality, and for the people that we will be reaching out to help, because there are so many in need right now. Heather, thank you. Thank you to you and your family. What's happening at Lighthouse is amazing. We will send out the links to their website and social media on our social media, in our email blast, and through text message this week so that you can check out what they're doing. But it is an amazing organization, and there are several other amazing organizations we're also going to have the opportunity to hear from in the next year. For now, as we get ready to transition into our service, let's pray together. God, we're grateful for calling that leads to discovery, and discovery that leads to redemption. We're grateful for the opportunity to learn about the ways in which you are redeeming brokenness in the world through people who have listened when you called and followed when you've led. God, we pray for those people that are in need of your help right now. We know, and we trust that you are where they are. And we know, God, that you are a God of power and strength and redemption and hope. But we are also not where they are right now. And so we're grateful that you're calling us to figure out how to be there, to figure out what it means to show up in the places where your love is needed through us. Help us as we discover how you're leading us into that mission and ministry, and be with those who are asking for that help now. Bring others together, bring others to us, bring others to them. Provide help through the hearts of those who will listen when you call and follow where you lead, so that together we can be a part of what you are doing, first to redeem brokenness, and then, God, by your grace, to prevent it. This we ask in your holy name. Amen. All right, friends, our praise team's going to practice. You are welcome to hang out for a little bit in here if you would like to do that, or grab some coffee, and then in about a half an hour, we're going to have another worship service.